wanting to write that food on there like, oh, ago, and it felt like it was 4 weeks ago. But I just had a brownie that was out of the ordinary, and it was another out of the ordinary instance. So I start to notice how many out of the ordinary instances there are when I'm trying to apply my diet.
We're good.
Yeah, perfect, good. So welcome Facebook Live and welcome YouTube Live. We're just getting everything started here. Tonight we're talking about diets demystified. So we're talking about the things that help us do better on our diets, no matter what your diet is, and making sure that we can use those techniques to do better on our health plans. So this is my family. So me and my husband and our little dog Bobo. So Bobo is on a raw food diet. He has no problems because we control the food that he puts down on the floor. All of his treats are super ultra healthy. And that's probably one of my biggest things about keeping my diet healthy is staying in control of the foods that actually come into my house or end up on my plate in front of me. If I just don't have those foods in my house, if I could kind of have the control over my food that I do over my dog's food, things go so much easier. So that's one of my tips too, is if you think of the control that you have for your animals, and sometimes it's harder for your kids because your kids, you want to give them treats and surprises and do all the things that we learned growing up are feel-good things, right? Those feel-good foods. But those feel-good foods can make us not feel so good in the long run. So I still haven't, if you guys have seen my slides before, I'm still trying to figure this part out. What this is supposed to say is standard American diet. On this end of the triangle, it should say nutritional deficiency and organ dysfunction should be over here. But technology just isn't my forte, and so I'm still figuring this one out. It's a matter of font things in this. So anyway, with these three, when we eat the standard American diet, which is the stuff that we see on TV, right? Fiber One and Metamucil and all of these regular foods or food supplements that we think of in the grocery store, they really lead to nutritional deficiencies. They're foods that are out of balance, and they're foods that aren't really nutritious. They're foods that are actually robbing us of nutrients and making us feel happy and satisfied and full, but also causing then organ dysfunction. So they cause us to be more hungry, less, full, and in the long run because they don't have the good nutrients to be able to support our bodies. So when we're doing this, we're going back to more standard American diet. We're taught to do things like eat multiple meals per day, 6 times per day, small meals. And those are the things that really end up kind of plummeting our health. So tonight I'm going to talk to you about our main diets that we tend to use here, and then how you can use those to reach your health goals. So these are the ones that when you walk into a room with us, we're going to be talking to you about. So the ketogenic diet, the low carb, high fat. So I added this one in because we really don't talk to you about low carb, high fat because it's so undefined. But ultimately, that's what a lot of people are working on. Intermittent fasting, the FMD or the fasting mimicking diet. If you watch some of my videos I just refer to it as the modified fasting diet or the 5-day fast. So all of those are the same, they're synonymous. And then foods that are like anti-candida, anti-bioburden, or antiviral diets. So if you're one of my patients or one of our patients here, you've probably walked out of the office with more than one of these given to you before, right? So you know that you're supposed to leave and try and increase your fats, and you're supposed to follow the anti-candida diet, and things can get a little frustrating of what does that mean? Am I doing the anti-candida diet and increasing my fats and doing a ketogenic diet? I don't understand, right? So hopefully tonight this brings a little bit of clarity. So I wanted to start off first with the low carb, high fat diet. So this is a diet where there are no defined numbers. There isn't a technical rule book to follow on this one, right? But the standard American diet, which is just kind of, eating anything that's out of a bag or a box and maybe looking at calories and eating more times per day, typically once somebody is starting to become more aware and they're moving towards a low carb, high fat diet, they are starting to look at numbers. So it's just a beginner step. It's probably one of the easiest things to begin to follow if you're not yet away from a standard American diet. Because of the fact that there are no numbers, if numbers are something that intimidates you or stops you, so you mentioned earlier that having the defined structure helped you be successful. So if that's something that helps you with success, this is not the diet for you. If you're the person on the other end of the teeter-totter, where you say, I have all of this structure and it stresses me out and I just quit because I know I'm already failing at it on day 2, right? Sometimes that was me. And so following something like this was a little bit helpful for me as I kind of got my feet wet and started changing things in my environment. So really, this is any diet that follows the philosophy of being low carb and high fat. So diets like Atkins and South Beach tend to fall into here. So if you're technically doing an Atkins diet, it's a high protein diet, which isn't even mentioned here, and that's why this diet can be a little bit confusing for people. If you're reading about a low carb, high fat diet in the news, you know, it's, what does that mean? McDonald's can be a high fat diet, and we know that that's not healthy, right? So it's definitely not low carb though. Mm-hmm. So there are no universal quantities or qualities about this, which is another thing that is confusing. So we like to kind of take away that confusion and start to implement more rules and things that you have understanding and control over what you're doing. So this would be a long-term approach, but also there's no monitoring to it. So you can keep a guidebook of your foods and what you've been doing in order to monitor yourself. And I included this because if you're someone who frequently quits because of feeling discouraged, this might be a spot for you to start, right? So if you feel like you fail too easily and you really feel like qualitative measurements, keeping a food journal, and counting your wins are easier for you, this might be a place to start. So a myth is that the low carb, high fat diet is ketogenic. And so that is false, right? It is not equal to a ketogenic diet. You could certainly be doing this and be getting into ketosis, which is where we're using fat as fuel and we're no longer using glucose as our primary long-term fuel. But just because it's high fat doesn't make it ketogenic. So let's now talk about the ketogenic diet. So in the news where you typically see ketogenic diets, there are some universal structures to the quantities to this. So 75% fat, 20% protein, and 5% carbohydrates is a real universal understanding of a ketogenic diet. This does lack quality standards though. So some people doing a ketogenic diet might still be eating refined carbohydrates as their 5%. It would be really hard in my opinion because I would struggle with eating that refined food. When you refine a food, even if it's an organic food, you increase the glycemic index to it. When you're doing a ketogenic diet, you don't want foods that have a high glycemic index because you're already naturally going to be more, your body is going to respond to glucose and insulin better, right? So you really want to have foods that are like vegetables as your carbohydrates. Other people will be doing foods in a ketogenic diet that have lots of dairy. So for me, I do a ketogenic diet, but I don't eat dairy. So oftentimes the books, the recipe books, the things that I look to for ideas contain a lot of dairy because they're a good high fat, they're a good fuel source. But if you're someone who feels like potentially you haven't done well with dairy in the past, or that, you know, just for other reasons you don't want to eat dairy, be your own guide on that. So don't necessarily say, I'm going to follow a ketogenic diet and I'm going to begin eating things like dairy that I wasn't eating before. This is a long-term approach, right? So this is not a quick diet. So for that reason, it gives people lots of understanding. It gives you a continuous guide. You're not looking for what do I need to do at the end of 5 days, or now what do I do at the end of 30 days, right? There are lots of other good diets. There's the 1 degree of change, which is 21 days. We have the 5-day fast, the whole 30, all really great diets, but they leave you with questions and to reintroducing foods after that. So when you go right into the ketogenic diet, you don't have those questions because you're actually creating new behaviors that are long-term. The other great thing about the ketogenic diet is that you get to monitor things. So if you were someone who didn't come here, watch our videos, and you weren't working with us, you could apply this concept and you may or may not actually be going into true ketosis. So by monitoring what you're doing, by macronutrient tracking, macronutrients are looking at fat grams, carbohydrate grams, and protein grams. And you can track that online in an app called Chronometer. There are lots of different apps, you know, MyFitnessPal, MyFatSecret. There are lots of different ones out there. I like to use Chronometer. We use it mostly in this office because it gives you net carbohydrates. So you don't have to do extra, you know, math on the fiber grams and things like that. And it basically is just a universal way of being able to speak with our tablets and looking to your practitioner for help and whatnot. So using a macronutrient tracker is a really good way of getting started on monitoring yourself. So another way of monitoring yourself, blood glucose, blood ketones, and the glucose ketone index. So this is where you buy a small device like the Keto Mojo. We're mostly familiar with people around us who might have diabetes monitoring their blood glucose, right? But if you're doing a more advanced type of diet like the ketogenic diet, it's to your benefit to be able to begin monitoring your blood glucose and your blood ketones. And once you start to get a hang of what you're doing, you don't have to monitor these all the time. I will typically only monitor these a few days out of every month for myself when I'm moving back into ketosis, and even when I feel like I'm pushing myself out of ketosis. So pushing yourself out of ketosis is another thing that you have to do. So you do have to have a high carb day throughout the month as well. So no matter what type of ketosis that you're doing, I gave you the percentages on the last page, but this one gives you ratios. So a 1-to-1 ratio, a 2-to-1 ratio, 3-to-1, and so on. You can figure it like this, that for every 100 grams of fat, you would have about 33 to 58 protein grams and about 20 to 40 carbohydrate grams. So you add these two together, and they should equal this, right? So you can have some ranges there. I just like to let you know that you can have a range. It's not a solid number. Moving upward, if you had 90 grams of fat in a 2-to-1, it should be something smaller like 20 and 26. So these should be half of this amount, right? So you're kind of playing with those numbers. And typically, if you're just brand new to ketosis or you're moving from a standard American diet, you would want to start somewhere low like this where it's easier. And moving up towards something like this where you're only having 8 carbohydrate grams, that's pretty intense for some people. Now, if you're working on something like epilepsy, neurodegenerative diseases, cancer, things that I call like stage 4 level diseases where, you know, epilepsy isn't that, but it's serious, right? We have to get serious with our diet. And so you want to really apply something like this and you want to go at it as fast as you can. You can't take time and things like that. But if you're working on just getting your feet wet and changing your health and you're clearing mood swings and asthma and back pain and, you know, you're working on just more general health goals, you can start out somewhere like this and kind of get your way into it in order to have it be more of a normal approach to things. So using the ketogenic diet, you can begin to do things like removing dairy, removing genetically modified foods. So you're already starting to take good care of your health. These aren't part of being ketogenic, but you certainly can get like water filtration systems. Mostly in this office, we use the Berkey water filter. So, but you know, starting to clean up the water that you're putting in your body. Our body is 70% water, so making sure that we're cleaning the water that we put in is very important as well. So, removing the refined foods. So, you know, when you're removing the refined foods from your diet, it's going to be so much easier to stay in a ketosis type of diet. If you look to your high carb days like an opportunity to cheat and, you know, kind of go off the rails and have brownies or bagels or whatever it is that you really enjoy, you'll definitely have a harder time getting back on track. It can be hard. Some people I know, that's what keeps them going. They say, you know what, one day out of the month, I know I get to have my cake and I get to have my refined, bad for me foods, and that's what keeps me going. And at that point, it's better to do that than it is to keep eating it all the time, right? So you have to look at where you're at, and you have to make this diet work for you. So the difference between refined and unrefined is that they enter the bloodstream differently. So if you're looking at refined carbohydrates, and this is where I talk about like sneaky health stuff. So when you go into the organic aisle and you find like organic graham crackers, they're non-GMO, they might even be made out of almond flour. But what these foods are is they're refined, so they've been milled down and processed. When you mill down and process foods, it increases that glycemic index, which means that it enters the bloodstream more rapidly. So that has a negative effect on our body, right? And it makes us kind of have that blood glucose go up faster and then drop faster too. Whereas if we treat ourselves with things like, eating vegetables and finding out how to enjoy cutting up some red bell peppers or yellow bell peppers, and it's a big jump there, I get it, right? But really looking at making those changes in your mindset so that your taste buds can follow. Because it always goes that way. You have to have your mindset change before your taste buds follow. If you are the, opposite of that, I need to know about it. Because I haven't found anybody who, was raised on bad foods and then had to make a taste bud change before they made a mindset change to liking healthy foods first. So that's why that's important, even when it's that organic, organic Cocoa Puffs, right?
Yeah.
They're still not health foods. They're still diminishing our health and our diets. So another myth and understanding is that the ketogenic diet means I'll never be able to celebrate my birthday again. So, as you're doing a new diet, you might decide that that's going to be your cheat day or your high carb day, because that is necessary where you bring your carbohydrates up and you do reduce your fats to kind of exercise your metabolism so that your body does come out of ketosis and then can go back into ketosis. So you certainly can have high quality or poor quality, cake on your birthday or whatever it is that you might be celebrating. It doesn't mean that you'll never have these foods again. And another thing is, too, to be aware of is that once you start cleaning up your diet, you can start looking for things like ketogenic cookbooks. And they'll have ways to do ketogenic cookies, ketogenic cakes, and with different levels of, healthy nutrients. Some of them might be full of dairy, but you might just want to make those choices based on what you're doing and what fits best for you to be able to stick to your diet so that your diet promotes your health goals. So intermittent fasting. Moving from the ketogenic diet to intermittent fasting. This one is one too that I think a lot of people, along with low carb and high fat, often think intermittent fasting is the same as a ketogenic diet. So intermittent fasting is really just a time restriction diet. It doesn't put any limitations on what you eat, the quality or the quantity, how much of the food that you eat. The quantitative measure is really just the amount of time in a day that you actually choose to eat versus the amount of time that you would be considered fasting. So this is also a long-term approach. Sometimes I do have patients who use this as a short-term approach, and it's their first step into cleaning up their diet. They say, I don't have the time to do meal prep, and I kind of never really liked breakfast in the first place. I hear that actually a lot, and people say, well, I thought I had to eat breakfast because it's the most important meal of the day. And so sometimes if you haven't been liking breakfast anyway, you've been forcing yourself to eat it, go ahead and begin intermittent fasting and skip that 8 a.m. breakfast. Make sure that you're not eating until noon, and then eat a lunch or potentially skip a lunch and just eat a dinner then at 8 p.m. And you've reduced your eating window into an 8-hour eating window. So as you get better at this, you'll be tracking your time and say, wow, I was grouchy. I really got mad at my colleagues at 11:30. Maybe I should try and eat something at 11 o'clock right now so I don't blow up at everybody at 11:30 every day until my body gets more used to this. That's probably the number one thing I hear with intermittent fasting is when people start skipping their breakfast, they get a little bit hangry or grouchy when they're skipping their breakfast. So you want to make sure that you're moving your diet in the appropriate direction. Like I said, if you're feeling very ill or very sick and you're really using diet as an approach to feel better, you want to go at a stronger gradient. If you are feeling like you're just getting into this because you want to take care of yourself and improve your health, then you can go at a slower gradient and pay attention to, okay, I'm going to move things back and, eat at 11 and get to that 8 hours. Or go ahead, come on in and sit down. Don't be shy. You can come right in front. It's better to be here than not to be able to make it. So, so make those adjustments as it's appropriate for you, okay? Other people will get to that 4-hour window where they have their first meal at 12 o'clock and then they have their last meal at 4. And if you're getting real strict like that and you feel like your energy is improving, you're not feeling as hungry. So if you're feeling hungry, ask yourself, have I had enough water, right? And ask yourself, do I think I'm hungry or do I feel hungry? That's a big question, right? There are a lot of times where I thought I was hungry, but I wasn't. I didn't feel hungry at all, and I actually had energy. I still had enough. I knew that I ate enough food throughout the day, but I felt hungry in my brain. And sometimes that was just simply because of my routine. My routine was that after I drive home, I get home and I eat a meal. But that day I had an early breakfast and I had an extra large lunch so that I was going to have a late night like tonight. So I won't go home and eat tonight. And so, but I can tell you, I'll be thinking on the drive home, oh, what am I cooking? It enters in my brain. What am I going to cook? What am I going to eat tonight? Because that's what happens during my drive home. So being aware of those things can really help you too, if you're physically hungry, and paying attention to that too if you're having struggles like getting an emotional kind of mood swing because you're too hungry as you're making these transitions. So what you're really looking at too is your nighttime should all be your fasting period. So when we're talking about fasting for 20 hours in some cases, like the person who eats between the 12 to 4 o'clock window, that person would be considered fasting for 20 hours. So if you're ever reading about this, your sleeping fasting period is usually about 8 hours, right? So then it's adding on your morning fasting window and your evening fasting window, or one or the other. I've definitely had people who only increase the fasting window in the morning and they eat all through the regular times at night. And so whatever works for you. I know for me, if I eat after 7 p.m., this body loves to store that food as fat. It can be broccoli, and this body stores that broccoli up as fat. It just loves to store food. So if your body loves to store food as fat, you might also be the person who skips the evening meals but has your breakfasts. If I have very large breakfasts and very large lunches, I do much better with kind of maintaining my weight on things if I know that I'm going to be home after 7 p.m. So, this is such big font and I didn't mean for it to be. But what this actually says is the myth is that I can skip a meal and begin intermittent fasting, and this means I can do whatever I want and achieve my health goals. So that's false, right? Is a lot of people think, well, if I begin intermittent fasting and I just get going in the morning and I have my coffee, I eat my lunch and my dinner, there's so many good studies that say that intermittent fasting improves longevity, improves our health, improves mental clarity. And yes, but this does go back to the quality of your food and how well that does. Now, if you're someone who has been eating McDonald's for the past 30 years, and you start skipping your McDonald's breakfast, you probably would feel so much better, right? But that's not your long-term health goal, just to skip a McDonald's dinner. It's to get all of the food that's entering your body to truly be nourishing you, not causing harm, and really causing function so that we can live the best lives that we have. So the fasting mimicking diet, FMD, 5-day fast, modified fast, however you want to call it, So this does give food quality restrictions because this is a very specific diet where for 5 days you're going to have 2 avocados, you're going to have 2 green drinks, and you're going to be adding lots of salt to your water, adding minerals, and if you're a black coffee drinker, you can still drink a cup of black coffee each day. This is a very severe kind of diet and putting your body into a fasting mode very quickly, but it's fasting mimicking. So the way that your body reacts mimics as if you were fasting, doing like a water fast. But it's a little bit easier to do because of the fact that you still get to have your green drinks, so your detoxifying green drinks. They're also a little bit energizing. There's some green tea and other herbs in there that help to be able to improve your energy, maintain your bowels, and help you feel good. The avocados strictly give you an easy fat to digest. So you get to keep on digesting fat, not go into that little bit of lethargic state that some people can do when they first begin a water fast, a true fast, right? So it does give the quality and the quantity guidelines because you can only eat so much and of very particular foods in order to achieve the desired outcome of doing this fast. The desired outcome of doing this fast can be weight loss, it can be to reset your hormones, it can be, you name it, headaches, all of the things that we're applying any of these diets for health corrections. The fasting mimicking diet can do that too, but because it's a short-term approach, you have to have some other plan for what to do when you quit the fasting mimicking diet, right? There's no tracking with it because you're kind of limited to what you're able to do. I do recommend that if you're not already using Chronometer, you begin using Chronometer during the 5-day fast because it's very easy. You get used to it. You guys see me in my electronic tools. I'm so bad at them. So when I started actually using Chronometer, I started it during a 5-day fast, and it was so much easier because I just put in avocado every day, and I put in my black coffee if I drank it, and it was just this repeated behavior that by the end of 5 days, I felt like I had mastered. So on day 6, I really had a lot of work ahead of me that would have felt very frustrating if I hadn't already mastered avocados and coffee in the 5 days prior to that. So, just remember, if you get frustrated with any of the things that we tell you, we've already done it and we've been frustrated with it too. It's not something that we're asking you to do without reason and without us having gone through those same irritations. So this can be repeated every month. So if you are getting into a health, diet plan that you're not quite mastering, but you feel like you did this and you had good benefit from it, you can repeat it every month. So I don't recommend repeating it more than once a month because there's really no gain to that, right? If you need to be fasting more frequently, you should be working with your practitioner, finding out what type of fasting you should be doing. But as a very general health plan, if you're someone who can tolerate fasting, and of course all of these diets and fasts aren't for everybody, right? So you should be working with your health care practitioner to find out if and which of these are right for you. But if it is right for you, doing it once every single month is personally what I do. I really get myself back on track, and ever since I started doing this last year, I feel so much better. I have so much more control over my health because that 5 days each month is a very good reset for me. So the myth of the fasting mimicking diet is that losing weight was so easy over those 5 days. I'm going to treat myself with a big steak or with a big pizza. And those are the 2 most common errors that people make. It's typical to lose approximately 9 pounds in the 5 days. So it's easy to just kind of go on the fasting mimicking diet. You're very strict, regimented. You can even eat late. My body that loves to even store broccoli as fat doesn't store broccoli as fat on those 5 days because the calorie restriction is about 25% of your normal daily intake of calories. So that's how you're going into that fasting state. So you're really burning off all the nutrients that you're eating. And so usually by day 5, you don't feel hungry. You've gone into ketosis, and the idea is that it was so easy, I can just go treat myself because it was easy, right? I can redo it again, even if I gain a pound or two. I have not met one person of the people who I warned not to do this who did it. And if they ate red meat isn't necessarily a bad food. If you're getting good quality meat, that's not the reason. The reason to not eat red meat on the days following your fast is because it is the slowest meat to digest in our digestive tract. So after you've gone from not eating a normal amount of food in a day to eating the slowest food that you can digest, it can cause some pain, some digestive upset, right? Because it'd be like eating like a big bean burrito would probably be like the same effect. Very slow to digest, gas producing, make you feel uncomfortable. But I just haven't met anybody who wanted to go eat a bean burrito afterward. It's always a steak or a pizza. So the pizza, on the other hand, is high refined carbohydrates, causes lots of bloating, lots of discomfort, and after people eat that pizza, they literally gain back every single pound that they lost, sometimes more, in one meal. Wow. And that's the pizza. Crazy. So if you lost 9 pounds, I've seen people gain 11 pounds by the next day, because what your body does is it goes from a status of understanding that it's burning its reserves, right? It's not in a storage state. It's burning its reserves. And so if you take us back to, years ago, decades ago, when we were in reserve state, we were eating. We were out on our farms. My grandparents were farmers, so when we were out farming, we were like grabbing a pear, and then we were picking pears, and then we would walk back out and grab another pear and eat it, and then we were picking pears and bring them in. We were eating the food as we brought it in. And so if you go and eat a big high carbohydrate meal like this after you fasted yourself, your body's trigger is to store it because it's going to get ready to go through another fasting state. So that's exactly why it happens. So be prepared to gain all that back, and just don't do it, right? I already gave you the warning, so just don't do it. So the anti-candida, anti-bioburden, and antiviral diets. These are quality diets. These are not diets that typically give you numbers of, how many grams of anything that you can have in a day. So if you're someone who comes into our office and we're muscle testing you and we test you for specific foods, then you know not to eat those foods, right? If you test for specific immune types of challenges that we're looking to help you get on diets to help those immune challenges, these would be the types of diets we would give you. So this would be the most important thing 9 times out of 10 that you can do. So if you're working on, battling fungus and you're constantly eating foods that are high content fungal foods or that help feed fungus, then you might not be very successful even though you're eating a clean diet, right? You could be eating whole foods, but I'll give you my example of when I was eating whole foods. I was doing low carb and high fat, and I was eating sausage. I'm Polish, so I was eating Polish sausage, and I was eating sauerkraut, and I was putting mustard on my Polish sausage, and I was cooking all this with tons of pepper. All of those foods are all on the do not eat list. And my snack at that time was pickles, because pickles are low carb. They're a great low carb snack. They're really salty, and it's another food that really can actually promote fungus in the gut. So that's why I say if you need to do one of these diets, you can be doing ketosis, but if you're doing ketosis like what I just described, you'll actually be feeding your fungus and causing more problems. I know, you can laugh at me. I had to laugh at myself. That's why I give the story.
I have fungus and I'm eating those foods.
Oh, yeah, so there you go. That's why I share all my mistakes. If it's a mistake to be made, I've made it. So I try and share my mistakes as often as I can, because it's just something that, you start pulling away the different foods and you go, oh, I can do this, no problem. And you wonder why you get stuck. I did. And so that was one of my experiences of why I was stuck. So on that note, coffee. Coffee is on the antifungal list. And there were times that I did this diet successfully and I didn't cut out coffee. And instead I moved to buying a higher ground blend of coffee, where coffee beans, when they're grown at different elevations. And so if you're getting the higher elevation coffee beans, they have more sunlight. They end up having less mold content. So also as the coffee beans are grown at different elevations, they have different pesticides that even if they're an organic company, they might have pesticides running down on them. So you want to get one of the higher elevation coffees. My favorite is called Kicking Horse. If you're local, Kicking Horse is sold at Meyer. You know, I have no affiliation with Meyer, other than I love going there. So, but yeah, those are coffees that you can maybe move to and not have the same mold problems as if you were buying, you know, other brands. So you can apply a food journal to be able to track what bothers you. That was how I figured out the sausages were bothering me. And really, when it came right down to it, mustard was what was really bothering me when I was before I was actually doing the antifungal diet on that time. I would realize that every now and then I just felt this wave of just feeling unwell. And it was when my husband and I would go to the ballpark, and I was not getting a bun on my hot dog, and I would put the mustard on it, and I would eat not healthy food, but I was doing better for my environment, which is what I ask of you. Do the best thing that you can in your environment. So when I would do that, and then we would go sit in our seats, and I thought it was maybe like a social anxiety type of thing. I didn't know what it was, but I was feeling this weird wave of just brain unwellness is the best way I can describe it. Well, then I started noticing I was feeling that at home too. And so then I started putting together, it was whenever I would have mustard. And so I started having even the sausages without mustard, and I was okay. But anytime I would add mustard to my food, so that vinegar was really causing an upset for my body. So I figured that out through my diet record and by logging it. Well, when I really looked at the last page of the antifungal diet or anti-candida diet, I took all those foods out. I did keep coffee because that was something I didn't feel like I could just peel away, and I did okay with it. And I definitely, you know, made my progress. So keep your health, your food record to be able to look at when your health doesn't feel so great, so you can make those connections of which foods on the antifungal diet that we're recommending that you don't eat, reduce, or avoid. Which ones are the real problematic ones? Because you'll probably find one or three of them, or one of the categories is the big contributor, and yours might be different than what mine was, right? So this is sometimes a myth that people think. If I follow this diet perfectly, I won't have the need for any of my supplements anymore. And so supplements in this office, we teach you about the appropriateness of diet plus supplementation to a good diet. So when I'm talking about supplementation, not everybody needs particular anti-candida or antifungal supplements, right? Some people can actually follow an antifungal type of diet and do well with that. So the question comes in, well, why can't I do that then too? If I'm perfect with it, it will work. And then it's a matter of what has your body been through and what has my body been through. And if I do the anti-candida diet and after 60 days I have some mustard and I feel really sick again, I know that my body just doesn't have the leverage to be able to do its entire job with just changing my diet, and therefore I need to supplement what I'm doing, what I'm eating, with nutritional supplements to help rid the candida or repopulate the gut or help the organs that have been affected by that. Now, if you do the anti-candida diet and you say, you know, my health was great, I've never had a health issue until last December, and I just don't know what it was last December that changed, but I went to the doctor and I got an antibiotic, and I was better after the antibiotic, but I was never quite the same after that. Well, you might be the person that you get your probiotics from your foods, you do the anti-candida diet, and you're great afterward. It's just that typically that's not the majority of what I see. Most of us have been exposed to lots of toxic foods throughout our lives, and our bodies are kind of breaking down as we go along, and so we need that little bit of extra help. So if you're wondering, well, why am I supplementing and changing my diet? It's because they're both needed. We also just can't take the supplements and not change our diets either, right? So the diet is the foundation, and the supplements are the things that really, it's like the interior decorating, right? It's what helps everything go right in your body. So can I use multiple diets? So if you've received instructions on us, one week we tell you to start ketosis, the next week we say anti-candida. Can I use multiples of these? The answer is yes. So this is how I actually would have you get started on cleaning up your diet. The number one thing, if you're new to cleaning up your diet, or if you're like me and I kind of like throw my train off the tracks every now and then and I have to get back on the tracks, the first thing, just begin logging your food. Whether you use Chronometer, an online app to look at those numbers, which would be, I really think I'm eating perfect foods, but I'm just not feeling like I'm getting the health gains I should from this diet perfection. Whereas a daily handwritten journal might be, I'm eating brownies, and then I'm having chocolate covered almonds, and then, because I'm buying organic chocolate covered almonds and they have sea salt. You guys can see what I like to go to, right? These are the foods that call me. And because I don't even love chocolate. Isn't that the funny part? So to me, I go to chocolate because it's the easiest thing to not get addicted to. So I like gummy bears. That would be my ultimate cheat food, right? So just plain straight up sugar. So writing those things down, it's what helps me to not have them. It's like, oh, okay, I know this isn't good. I don't want it. So if you're having a struggle, if you're, new, just start writing things down or use Chronometer. Some people, when they're brand new, they don't know the numbers in Chronometer or what they mean, and so it starts to get more confusing. So usually if you're new to things, I say, don't use Chronometer until you have somebody's help. Also, a real generic number for water goals, like how much water we should drink in a day, is 50% of your body weight. So if you're 200 pounds, 100 ounces. If you're 120 pounds, 60 ounces, right? So those would be the amounts of water, usually at a minimum, that you're looking at drinking in a day. The real benefit of starting to drink water as you're making your health goals or health changes is that the brain really doesn't have a sensor to understand when we're hungry or thirsty. So oftentimes when we think we're very hungry and nothing can curb our hunger, it's that we're actually thirsty. So get up in the morning, have a glass of water. Before your meals or after your meals, have some water. Make some time in there for water. Personally, I don't like to drink water with my meal. I like to eat my meal, digest it well, and drink water at least an hour before or after. So, but if you're really just getting new to things, or if you're struggling, you're just trying to get more water in, period. So, also focus on just getting snacking out of your diet, right? So if you actually just look at how we evolved, we didn't used to snack. So this idea of, eating 6 small meals a day, it's proved that it makes our insulin more resistant. It makes us less able, more likely to have metabolic syndrome, right? So what you want to do is make a breakfast, lunch, and dinner time. Stick to those times. If you're snacking in between and you're having something like a half of a bagel, treat yourself to 17 almonds, right? 17 almonds is a FDA serving size, so if you're putting numbers into things, you start to know serving sizes. So it's as you kind of gain control of your diet and even switch what you're snacking on that you'll be able to stop snacking. Stopping snacking, along with stopping eating sugar, are some of the most important things that you can do in order to start gaining control of your health. So once you've gotten control of this, look at the quality of your food. This is kind of a little slide, but what it basically says is eliminate the foods that, if you're one of our patients, that we tested you on. So we test you with the stress kits to see if there's a food intolerance that we can work on, right? So I recently had the coolest thing. A young woman came to start working with me here. She tested for 1 vial out of all the stressor kits, and it was corn. So I told her, I said, just stop eating corn the best that you can. She's young. She's still in school. And so I said, just do your best. I don't expect you to be perfect because when you go to school, there's corn syrup and everything. There's corn chips. There's corn tortillas. There's corn everything, right? And she just started on 2 little supplements, and she came back in after a week. No gut pain, no headaches. instead of feeling angry, she was feeling happy. And so this was such an important thing for her. And then Mom said, and she quit eating corn. We started packing lunches for her. And it used to be at school after the lunches that, things really changed. So you can't even look at it and go, well, corn is healthy. It's a vegetable, right? It's a food. It's a whole food. But it's not good for us anymore. Foods like corn, wheat, and soy, they're so abundant in our foods, and you really want to start eliminating those. Anyone can start eliminating those. But especially if they show up as your stressor, that young woman did such a wonderful thing for her health by not only taking the supplements, but even at that young age, starting to focus on her diet changes and not having that corn, that she made all those gains so quickly. It's a blessing, it's like what we can ask for, that we can just take a food out of our diet like that and feel the way we know we're supposed to feel. So I give that example because don't underestimate the importance of making these changes. If you're still eating sugar or other refined foods, I've kind of repeated about refined foods, even when they're organic, non-GMO, and they're healthy qualities, and they've got tasty times on them, whatever it says, it's still refined and milled. So it still has that higher glycemic index. It's still not the best thing to have as a daily food. So if you're not reducing your grains or beans, these can also be things that cause a little bit of digestive upset. So try and reduce them as a goal to about 10% of your weekly diet. If you're not ready to give them up, I'm grain-free, I don't eat beans, all these things kind of, they reduce my health instead of improving my health. So I don't want that anymore. But if you're having a struggle with that, an example, people say, give me an example. So my example is, get Ezekiel bread instead of getting, regular wholesome or wheat bread. Eat that with eggs at breakfast, or make some avocado toast. Put some bacon on the side of it. Whatever it is that you want to add to it, add some protein and fat. Another real great lunch that I love to have is taco salad. It does not include Doritos. It is just, I chop up the good old-fashioned iceberg lettuce, and it's so crunchy, it's satisfying. I don't even buy healthy lettuce, I just buy iceberg. And then I just saute the meat. I don't use the taco seasoning packets. I just saute the meat. I put some Celtic sea salt on it, and I put some cayenne pepper in it because I like hot foods. So I throw the meat onto my chopped up lettuce. I chop up some tomatoes, and then I'm so lazy, I don't chop up anything else. So besides that, I just put a little bit of salsa. And that is my taco salad. My husband has to have variety. He does not like the same taco salad as me, and he does okay with dairy. So he adds some cheese onto his taco salad, and he'll go and add more things, like he takes the time to cut up the avocado, and he's wonderful that he does all that, but I'm like, give me the food, it's fast, and I'm eating it. It's like, it's my job to eat it. So he definitely likes to enjoy his food a little bit more, but that's a great lunch. So if you feel like you've tried diets before and you were missing out, you can do this, and you can even go out to a restaurant and make a lot of those modifications and still go out and be with family and friends and not look like you're not having a good time by eating healthy foods. So dinner is usually something like fish and sauteed vegetables. It's just like an animal meat or protein that we typically have, and sauteed veggies. It's just that basic and just that easy to be able to start making those changes. Which, if you've ever gone through something like Whole30, you can see how doing this over and over becomes very habit and very routine. At the beginning, it's not habit or routine, and it feels very different, right? So as your body adjusts to that and begins to like these foods, give yourself some leeway, pat yourself on the back for wanting to make change and for beginning to do it. So I call that last one phase 1 because it's just getting all the bad stuff out, right? And phase 2 is when you begin what I call advanced diet applications. So once you've actually gotten the bad foods out, you quit drinking soda, you quit having, daily brownies, and, this is all stuff that I did. You quit having gummy bears for breakfast because they're fat-free. So that was me. You quit doing all these things. So now you're ready for more advanced types of diets. You can begin ketosis. So this is my days of the month, and this is how I apply all of these diets together. So day 1 through 5, it's the first 5 days of the month most of the time. I'm doing my cleanse, the fasting mimicking diet. Day 6 through 15, I stay in ketosis. Typically, I might be doing a little bit of intermittent fasting. Some mornings I skip my meals, and some evenings I skip my meals, or I have a very modified small meal. Like tonight I mentioned I probably wouldn't eat a meal. If I do eat a meal when I go home, it'll be sauteed broccoli or sauteed spinach. I keep tons of frozen vegetables in my freezer at all times so that I always have a healthy snack to run to no matter what. Day 16 is going to be your high carb day. So you're doing ketosis, you're doing intermittent fasting. Now you have to make sure you have a high carb day to pull yourself out of ketosis. So this is what I talked about when we talked about the ketogenic diet, is making sure that you try to stick to healthy quality carbohydrates, not poor quality carbohydrates. The decision is yours, and depending where you're at in your journey, you might do either one. Days 17 through 30, you're trying to resume a 1-to-1 ratio. So remember, that was the fat grams to the proteins plus carbohydrate is the 1-to-1 ratio. So the grams should be equal to each other over until day 17 through 30, and then you restart. During all of this, you want to maintain all the quality standards that you did in phase 1. So if you're doing an anti-candida diet, you want to continue with anti-candida foods, the promoting foods for the good gut health. If you're doing an antiviral diet, you don't want to start eating nut butters and adding in nuts, because that's on the no for antiviral, right? So if you're doing antiviral diet, you're really successful with it, and then I say to you something like, great, how about we start adding in some more fat and doing like a high fat, ketogenic diet? And you say, great. And then you go, I knew she was going to say I could have peanut butter again one day. But it's not what I said, right? I just didn't say it right to make sure and say, stay with those quality standards that you've already started. So sometimes that's just where we get goofed up with those things, and it's not bad. I did it. That's why I know it happens. And I've had my patients do it. And it's just a matter of really looking at, we've got to maintain what we're doing. You might go off of the anti-candida diet, and you might go off of the antiviral diet. But those things will be with different times. And so you always want to make sure that you're working closely with your healthcare practitioner to determine what's right for you, right? We might give you a 60-day time frame for the anti-candida diet, but it doesn't mean just go back to what you were doing before. It means after 60 days, we're going to reassess and determine what you should do from there, okay? So nutrition response testing is the muscle testing that I've been teaching you guys about. If you're coming into the office and I say, okay, well, my patient tested for corn, I'm doing nutrition response testing to be able to identify what it is that are our particular barriers. Why is it that, one person can go gluten-free and do so amazing, or one person cuts corn out of their diet, or another person starts eating healthy and gets really sick, but maybe that person had a viral challenge and started eating tons of nuts. And so they don't know why they thought they started eating healthy but got really sick from it. And so those are the answers that we get with nutrition response testing in order to design your clinical nutrition. Diets are hard and they're confusing, and there's not one diet that works for everybody, and there's not one way to apply it. This is a real generic, kind of description of a lot of our diets, our most commonly used diets, and how I use them, and how I have a goal of getting my patients to use them. But that isn't always what works for everyone. I have people who have such adrenal fatigue that if they take a walk, they feel great during their walk. But an hour after their walk, they have a mood meltdown, or they feel physical weakness in their legs. And so when that sort of thing happens, it identifies to me that there is an imbalance at the adrenals, right? And so now we have to make sure that someone with adrenal fatigue is eating 3 solid meals per day. They're not doing something like intermittent fasting, or they're not doing something like a ketogenic diet, but I might teach that person to do something more high fat, low carb, moderate protein that's not quite ketosis, because in ketosis we do go into a little bit of fight or flight mode. Our body is ready to go for that, right? So we can irritate the adrenals if we have adrenal fatigue and are applying the ketosis diet. So like I said, if you're doing one of these diets and it feels like not right for you, keep your journal. log what's happening. It will help us discover what will be right for you and what we need to make changes with. And sometimes the only way to figure it out, it's kind of like doing a good diet is like riding a bike. You get on and you fail. Some people get on and they take off and, they keep on going. But I didn't do that either. So, it's just a matter of getting on the bike, figuring it out. You kind of get your groove. You learn how to fall off. You learn how to get off. You get back on and you keep doing it. And you pay attention to the different terrain that you're on. Our life is different when we're on a vacation, when we're at families' houses, when we have family over. When we invite our nieces and nephews over, we have 7 total nieces and nephews. We've only had 6 of them all at one time. And so, but when we have them over, it's really hard for us to see on our health goals and also feed them healthy. We try and add some healthy stuff in, but also maintaining what they know as normal and real, right? And so kind of keeping everybody all together and cohesive and feeding them the right foods. So what you're doing can make these things difficult. So our total goal is to have overall health that's safe and natural. We know that doing something like taking 5-hour energy shots or doing quick burst dieting might get you fast results, but it's really not the results that we're looking for. We're looking for long term. Can you run the marathon? Can you make diet changes and maintain them? So we've got a pathway to health poster in all of our rooms. And at the very bottom, it shows, symptoms and problems. You start making health changes and it moves into correction phases in your body. After that, you move from correction into nervous system, brain health. And then from that, it's the goal. And the goal is 75% better than what you are right now. So I always teach my patients, you might want to go home and you might be really inspired to go throw away all of that junk food. And that's great. But I actually encourage people sometimes to keep one thing and just don't eat it, but leave it there. Because that way you don't feel as you're going on your health journey that it was something that you did at such a steep gradient that you just can't maintain it. It's like I could do that for a month, but I can't do it anymore, right? So you want to be able to make the changes. At the top of that poster that we have that I'm not showing you guys because it would be running to one of the rooms, but it has an arrow and then another arrow. And at the top of the second arrow, it says, this is healthy living. This is where diet and healthy choices are natural. So think of yourself, if there's an arrow here and an arrow here, where would you be at in the arrow to feeling good, right? So if you don't feel good, what can you do about it? What are you doing about it, right? If you don't feel good now and you're not doing enough about it, where will you be at in 5 years, right? So you have to start doing something about that. You can gain answers, you can gain control to start moving and feeling better no matter your age, no matter what you're doing. You just have to make that decision to do it. So gain the answers to get to the 75% better. If you're at 10%, kudos. If you're at 60%, kudos. Do those changes, make those changes at a sustainable rate so you can keep on making changes forward. And so that you can get to the top of that, which is where you've achieved the optimum performance of your body at any given time, right? So that's what we're all looking for. So with that, I just want to thank everybody for coming tonight. We'll go ahead, we'll say goodbye to all of the online live stuff, and then we'll have a few moments for some questions. Does anybody have any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you talk about the relationship between the brain's main source of energy being carbohydrates